This is IBM Museum. And look at what I have on that back screen. I have, and it's still separated. Everything's there. But I have a working 7496 executive workstation that I can go through and assemble. I'll go over some details and then go through and show some stuff here. But honest, it's all the components that would have been on an executive workstation, and I'll go through and show exactly what I've replaced. I have to look at the lighting conditions and see how things show up. I'm not going to necessarily raise anything up to the monitor. Well, I may. Let's go through. Let's take that away. And just so there's not any phase things happening or anything like that. But so I have the working tray, and that of course on previous videos I showed that how I went through and worked with the real-time clock on this unit, got everything working as far as this tray that sat underneath the case, and of course the attached monitor. And I'm glad that this monitor is effectively right side up. And I do have the middle section with the two cables running through connected. I could get those cables out to have this assembly out of the way, but it'd be a chore getting the cables back in there. I mean, they're kind of tight in the way that they do the routing. The video goes to the back here. And so and I've got panels off to the side and everything else. I'll go through and I'll get it to the point where I can seal everything back up. And but I want to go through and talk about the steps that I did to get here in the troubleshooting process. And this is the original planer. I've still left the CPU in there. Of course, I went through and I pulled the memory to go through and have in this unit. And I've got some more 256 kilobyte modules around that I can probably go through and use. But as remember, as I've actually already tucked it away, the parallel port postcode reader, that I had connected up to the parallel port on the back. When we went through and tested this, it was halting at postcode 07. And that is part of the MCGA initialization routine. MCGA chips being here, and the VRAM, the RAM DAC. There's like a character storage unit that's here. So this is, as I've talked about in other videos, get to where the light can not do as much of a reflection or show that. And you can see it kind of cut off, but it says P-planar because this is straight away from a PS2 Model 30 that's based on the 8086 CPU. And, MCGA video, I've gone through, I've put links in there, and it's known to have issues, and especially for these P-planers. They have an older chip here, or I guess a chip that IBM went through and replaced, and that it's got at least some brighter markings there. That's 72X8300. And it's bad when you get these things even memorized. There's a later Model 30 planer that it had the replacement chip, the 11 F8028, if my memory is right. And I'll link into the MCGA page and kind of show that. And of course, the PS2 Model 30 was produced before the PS2 Model 25, that all-in-one unit that's real similar. It had a built-in monitor. Of course, it was fixed. It didn't go through and rotate around or anything like that. And it didn't have the real-time clock on there for the PS2 Model 25. But they have a Type 1 planer that's earlier, and it has the same MCGA chipset. And IBM did an engineering change announcement called ECA 023. Basically told IBM field technicians for the Model 25, there was not a comparable release for the PS2 Model 30. They said, hey, find a Model 25 out there that has this effect that happens to the video. You go through and you replace the Type 1 planer with the Type 2 planer. That's the field replacement unit level. And they gave FRUs, and of course, they give the identifier, hey, you look for that particular identifier of chip. And if so, you replace the whole planer that's in the Model 25 for the newer one. So evidently the older planers had issues. There's early Model 30 planers I have, one that's got a bodge wire. It's got the initial BIOS that was released. And these executive workstations, these have effectively the revision 02 BIOS on them, and that matches up with all the FRUs and everything else. Okay. And we'll look at that. This planer that I have in place here also has the revision 2 BIOS. It's green in colorization, which typically, or a lot of the time, it meant a later planer that IBM produced, although it's not the so-called Greenwich planer. It's still a P planer. It's still the same planer type that's in there. Everything looks identical otherwise. The bodge wires, whatever else, there's not, not any bodge wires on there. And, it could be interesting even studying markings on this later on. And what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll bench this planer later on. And I've got freeze spray and things like that. I can try and do things just to see if I can throw some temperature changes at these chips and see what kind of happens from there. But, I'll bench it with a Model 30 power supply and put some sims in there and everything else, have a different, my video capture, whatever else. And we can go through and troubleshoot this. And I can see if we can get past that postcode error, what might be causing that, or if there's a way to correct that. The voltmeter checks, I checked for a bodge wire that is typically on the older Model 30 planers, and it's got continuity from pin 14 back to one of the resistors back here. So it's got effectively that bodge wire in there. So this is after they went through and reworked it a little bit. So from there, I do have the original riser back in there. And that's the case where I had to try other risers, and I went down that path of working with things, and I just discovered that MS-DOS I'm running is it's a little bit too new probably for initialization. I'm going to study aspects of that too and see, I plug in a riser basically like I was brand new riser and see how that real-time clock initializes a little bit. The real-time clock, and I've pointed this out before, it's that U16, that MM58167AN. And that is, for here, it's made the 20th week of 1987 by National Semiconductor. So, I've got that working, got that routine, released that previous video showing how to get that real-time clock working to check the values in both the ROM basic and in debug. Showed how to corrective action, how to do it in debug. Haven't really came out with the video yet to plug in the values from the ROM basic side, and that would be if you don't have a diskette drive that's able to read a diskette successfully or boot from that. Just the system throws you in ROM basic no matter what. That's fine. So I went through, this is the original diskette drive, and 720 KB because it's an unmarked big button drive, and didn't get anything. I mean, I can go through and I can troubleshoot this a little bit more. I've got a box of these that I'd save for these instances of having spare parts, because these aren't being made, there's not any other equivalent out there. And I'd swapped in a 1-for-1. It's the same model. And I had it marked on there as good. And it acts good sometimes. Was able to get it to boot to DOS one time, the DOS diskette, but couldn't run anything further. And of course, in this circumstance, and I'll get a 720 KB drive back in the system just to restore it to the initial configuration. But I have a 1.44 megabyte drive that's just a swap and replace. I've talked about this on video before. And the boot diskette I have in there is 720 KB. And I just had to do that for getting everything working. In the end, I'll have that diskette drive working. I mean, I could put in that other model and partially working and get all sealed up and everything else to demonstrate. The power supply is original, and thankfully that has given me no problem. And I even learned, and no jokes at all, I don't even want to talk about what you're thinking of or anything else like that. It's interesting that this plug here from the power supply goes through to the back of the monitor, and it ends in a regular C13 connection, just like the back of the unit here. It's a straight C13 plug. Has the hot, the neutral, and the ground in those. And it just says power supply goes through, and it senses that you're sending voltage down the line once you turn on the switch on the monitor. The power switch is on the monitor, and so it says, hey, current's passing through me. I've got to get through and start up. So that's all original. I've got it plugged in this case, to the monitor. I've got that connection, that 15-pin connection out of the back going through as well. And since I had the lower tray working, I went through and I started working with the monitor, pulled it off of the case top. And there's a back panel. This is the back panel, in fact. And it's interesting too, and it has shorter screws that are underneath these positions. And I think it was intended that it's supposed to have effectively longer screws like this, because there was Phillips screws that were lower in here, and they're in place. And the top part of it's not necessarily loose, but it's not affixed by these two screws here. They had the longer screws in here. That's the cover plate for the back of it. And we've got a little date code wheel. So 1987, and it's got the dot towards the 9. So the 9th month, September. And that's effectively even a full year after the BIOS revision was done for these. And it's good enough BIOS, so they kept it in there. Underneath this cover plate, once you pull this off, what it reveals is a Sony Trinitron display. And I don't know if Sony released them like this. I've got it all connected again, or otherwise I'd pull it out. I've took pictures. I could go through and put up images or whatever else, or links to where I can have those in a folder. And there's a cover that's over some of the controls. So it has open, it's a latch. And, I pulled that off. There's other potentiometers that are available that you could go through and tweak with a screwdriver or whatever else set if you're having problems with the video. Lots of controls. But underneath this cover, among the other controls, and it has like a vertical hold and stuff like that, there's a switch. And in fact, let's go ahead and I'll pause the video and I'll pull up that picture. I think it's helpful to display that. So this is the label that was on the back, identifying as a Sony model, and also there's a separate FCC label that's to the left of this, and made in Japan, serial number and everything. And this is what was under the other cover. So there's the controls there. I see the vertical hold in the middle. Underneath that, there's a switch, and it's marked as digital 2, digital 1, and analog. And that switch is in the middle position. It's on a digital 1 setting. And that's wrong. This Model 30 planer has a RAM DAC that converts the signals from digital to analog out of the system. So for my monitor troubleshooting, I didn't even have to touch any of the other controls for the settings. Remember, I had raster and everything else, just didn't have any display. All I did was flip that switch over to analog. So I flipped it over to the right in this view. Analog is the position that's on the right of that. And that was the end of the troubleshooting for the monitor. So really kind of cool. That was a relief because I've gone through it every step. This 7496 has just been throwing up every little curveball it can to say, I'm not going to work. You're going to have to replace parts on me. And that's the troubleshooting steps. Rather than me going through and trying to work with the planer and get past the postcode 07 and everything else, I've got spare planer. It's easy to just swap another planer in. Something I've already tested. I know it works, whatever. And I have spare risers. I have, all kinds of stuff. So diskette drives don't have power supplies. The power supply is unique to it. I don't have a CRT. The CRT is unique to this model. So at least that stuff looks like, I don't have replacements for. It works. I just move that switch over to analog, and there it is. So let's get back to the, and I'm going to leave it on camcorder. I'm not, because I'm not, the video output's going to that CRT. I said hide. Okay. So we've got, and at least I said this CRT's upright, got everything connected, got the power cord in the back, got the boot diskette in there. And maybe I can even zoom in or something else on this display. You see that? It's counting memory. 512, 576, 640 KB. Going through and booting from the diskette, starting MS-DOS. Remember, I still don't have an autoexec.bat file on that diskette. So it prompts me for the time and date. And it has, today's date. It's got, in fact, let's go through. Okay. And since I'm going to be out of the field of vision of the camcorder, we can turn that back on. And I'll grab the keyboard down here. So going through, I don't have to enter any new date. I don't have to go through and set any time. That time is pretty much correct. And you notice it didn't prompt me at the startup of the set, the date and time with that clock symbol and everything else. We're to the A prompt. And I was going to, in fact, I did copy some stuff onto that D symbol on the keyboard again. Okay, so I copied the QBasic and edit.com that I could, from my little tweener system that's over there to the diskette. And I thought, well, at the time I put the debug on here, I also put the Microsoft Diagnostic, that MSD.exe. And I mainly wanted to go through and test for color output. I mean, in Microsoft Diagnostic, and also it must be the S key as well, in addition to the D. So I have MSD for enter. Okay. It goes through and reads the program from diskette. Of course, that's off, a little bit off screen. See that access light going. And it'll stop at one point. It kind of goes through and loads some stuff. But looky there, we got color. Now, the MAR looks pretty good to me. I mean, there may be, and you have to remember, this is CRT age. There may be some adjustments. In fact, it looks a little bit wider margins over here on the right than what it is on the left, even for the off-center view that you're seeing from the camcorder. And of course, we see some stuff that's not normally visible to me for just that timing. Since it's on the same 60 hertz that I'm recording on, that is not, that little band is not visible to me in front of this. But if we do a, P for computer, and we see the same identifier as what we had bench before. It identifies the IBM PS2 Model 3286. It's got that FA, which means an 8086 CPU, and then the submodel of 00. The model PS2 Model 30 was 00. The PS2 Model 25 was submodel 01. And then the next characters over, that 02, are the BIOS revision. It's just the way that Microsoft did it. And it shows that basic copyright string for the ROM basic. And then the BIOS state, that 20587, being 1987, of course. And it's an enhanced keyboard, as it says, XT, ISA, Classic Bus. So there's our computer. Let's do M for memory. You see memory usage. I don't have a mouse connected. We can arrow for the things. Now the BIOS, and that's going to be another video. The PS2 Model 25 and PS2 Model 30, the 8086 based PS2s, they're the only PS2 without what's called an A BIOS for advanced BIOS that IBM did for the PS2s. And that's mainly for the aspects of working with OS2, the operating system. And the original BIOS is just referred to as the compatibility BIOS, or C BIOS. And the 8086 based PS2s do not have an A BIOS to them. So it is, interesting here. I mean, for the video, identifies it correctly as MCGA of an unknown vendor. We do V. Okay. And it says display type EGA monitor, which is interesting in itself on how it's identifying this monitor. Video mode 3. And it doesn't really have anything for the video BIOS version, video BIOS state. That's all incorporated. And the VESA support installed, all the higher level stuff. Okay. So that's your MCGA video that's on board. As I say, in fact, this is MS-DOS 6.22. I thought it was 6.21. So surprise, surprise. I mean, not that it matters much, but okay. So mouse is not detected. Other adapters, whatever, disk drives. Go through a disk for the D. Remember that keyboard just says, "Hey, I don't." And I'm trying to remember. There was, when I showed this earlier, I went through, and at one point it locked up. I think it was like the TSR programs or IRQ status, I think, that locked it up. And that may have gone through. F3. Okay. It just didn't want to display. And it's a 1.44 megabyte drive and a 720 KB diskette that it's got in there. So, that's great. It's got, boy, that D on this keyboard. And I don't know, I think I've got all the components. I don't have the help files or other things like that. The edit has to have the QBasic program in there to load. It's just a version of the QBasic interface. Okay, and we don't want to see the help file and stuff like that. but we've got blue text. I mean, this image is great for all that. It's a Trinitron, Sony Trinitron quality to the image. It could go through and be adjusted. It looks like it's a little bit in the clockwise direction. There's a little bit, even with the the video offset that you're seeing, it looks like there's a little bit more space, margin space here than there, and that may even be a somewhat of a tube alignment. And that can all be addressed, but I wanted to get it working. I wanted to go through and and of course it's bad that you can't you can't go with higher bigger characters than that to so I got to get it back together, but everything there works now. I have to find a working 720 KB drive, and I think about half of them in the box are bad, half are good. And I'm probably going to repair the ones that are bad at some point too, going to and figuring out what's wrong and seeing if I can get as many drives working. But this is just a relief. This is and I won the race, guys. Everybody else that's got a 7496 out there has shown 7496s on video one, pictures and everything else. I'm sorry, I won. I got it working first. And so and it's not even tonight, it's not as late as going through otherwise. So I'm glad I took those covers off the back and kind of looked in a little bit more detail and said, hey, that switch isn't set right. And now that I got the 7496 working, I got to get money for a stool. The back of the stool, it tilts me, so I'm like sliding off to the front, and I got a cushion and everything else. But I just sit there and have to readjust because it slides. But so I'm gonna put whatever tags in this video, put up there. I'll go through and advertise it out there. I'm not a real big channel name or anything else, but people can go through and find me and comment on the video. Give me some congratulations or something else. I'm going to go through and in addition to testing out the planer, what was causing it to halt at that postcode, going through and troubleshooting that, I'm going to have a little bit of a manual. And I did go through and recommend it to the other people that I know that have the 7496s to get those parallel port postcode readers, because they're very helpful. If you have PS2s around, those parallel port postcode readers work with every model of PS2, every model of them. So it's, you're in the US, you spend less than $10, get one to you for less than $10 USD total. I'm going to go through. In fact, I've negotiating a little bit with the power, where you can plug that little adapter, passive adapter, in the PS2 mouse port, and seeing if I can get some of those. And I've got spare card readers. Maybe I'll order a few, and that can be a little gift I give around or something like that. Just a PS2 starter kit, or in this case, a 7496 starter kit, and I've got the right angle power cords and stuff like that. I can do all that. And I'll go through and document the steps and just that, hey, you got this part tested, it works. Go to this part. Does that work? Okay, if not, replace it. and the final thing, and the other owners will have to go through and look and pull those covers off. And it's easy. You don't even have to have it disassembled like this. You can have it's just that back piece on the monitor. You pulled off just the 2 slotted screws at the, in fact, let me see if I can get in that field of view. Yeah, just the slotted screws on either side. That's even bigger than the screen. That you go through and pull, and then you just pull that little, it has that little cover. It says open at the bottom. Find out where my field of view is. Open. And pull that off, and you look at that switch there. And, if it's set to those digital input sources, switch it to analog, because that's the true video out. And, if that's what your monitor is, and Sony Trinitron quality, you should get pretty good video out of it, color video for these. One of the executive workstations had an 8500 series PS2 style monitor that was different. And I've said previously the 7496-037 being the submodel. I was saying that's the monochrome model or whatever else. So no, it looks like the color model. So I don't know what that other monitor that looks kind of like a PS2 styling, why that was done, if that's the monochrome version or whatever, or just different. But can go through and have the steps to go through and get one of these in working order. So there'll be other working 7496s as well that people can talk about. But this is fantastic. I'm going to revel in the moment, and I don't drink, but celebrate in some way, and spread the news around, spread the video, everything covering that, because it's going. And next time you see this unit, I'm going to have it buttoned up. We're going to flip the switch, and I can probably even do that on a video short from my camera phone, just to kind of show it going through and booting up. And hooray! So if you enjoyed this video, I certainly did. I certainly enjoyed the results. Click on that like button, please. And by all means, subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Recommend that others subscribe to my channel too. Just wait for the next videos that come out. You'll get notifications, so they go through and do those. So this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.